All right, in Linguistics 102 this week, we're looking at psycholinguistics. So in this video, as usual, I will recap last week's stuff, preview the material we're covering this week, and remind you of what's happening in the schedule. I'm also going to touch briefly about the whole reading week thing for next week. So last week we looked at sociolinguistics, and it's worth noting that we learned about three types of research in that section: variationist sociolinguistics, dialectology, and ethnomethodology, or conversation analysis. And I point this out because a large part of this week's material deals with research methods as well. So we're already kind of primed for that. All right, so the chapter for this week, chapter 12, is organized very much around a scientific narrative. So first we get a section on methods, then we learn about some empirical findings, and finally we look at how these findings can be synthesized into models of language processing as a whole. So in methods, we first learn about the difference between field methods, where the researcher seeks out opportunities to observe natural language use, like noting natural slips of the tongue, for example, and experimental methods, where the researcher actively constructs the situation in order to learn something about language. We learn about a bunch of different experimental paradigms, that is, general types of experiments, and some of them overlap. But so we have the processing of individual words. We have lexical decision tasks, which look at generally response latency, how long it takes to respond to some cue, and accuracy, how accurately you perceive what it is you're responding to. And within that, there are priming paradigms where you have a prime and a target. How does the presentation of a related thing affect how you respond to something else? Then we move on to processing of sentences. We have things like timed reading experiments, and they also often involve eye trackers to record how readers' eyes move back and forth across the text as they're reading and processing the meaning of the text. And we even have some non-invasive ways to study overall brain activity during language processing. So we learn about electroencephalogram, or EEG studies, revealing event-related potentials or particular electrical events that correspond to the processing of particular types of linguistic structures. And at the end of this section on data, we look briefly at large collections of language information that are proving useful as sources of stimuli for these experiments, and also as sources of kind of meta information about the waxing and waning of different experimental methods over time. The second section collects psycholinguistic results that bear on a number of different aspects of language processing: phonological, morphological, and syntactic. And then the third section, finally, we're introduced to graphical models. These are kind of flow charts that are a really useful way to summarize theories about how language as a whole is processed, from hearing or reading the input through to understanding, or vice versa, from having an idea to producing speech. This section illustrates several types of model and introduces distinctions such as serial versus parallel models, single root versus multiple root models, and symbolic versus connectionist models. And all of these build to a very important aspect of scientific knowledge in general, and linguistic knowledge specifically, which is that it's all contingent on the evidence. Every single conclusion, fact, belief we have in any science is tentative, and it's only as strong as the ongoing weight of the evidence that supports it. We don't do science to reinforce what we already believe, but to test whether it's really true and to learn things we don't already know. All right, that got a little bit grandiose, but it is an interesting chapter in terms of really digging into how we discover things that we know or believe we know about language. So there is no graded quiz this week, just the tutorial on Thursday. That's February 11th. So I hope to see you there. Check out the practice quiz once it's up, and keep in touch by email or however else you would like. I will be putting out a video next week, although because it's reading week and we don't have any new material to cover, it'll mainly just be a way of checking in, maybe taking stock overall of where we are in the term and what's coming up in the coming weeks. Okay, so that's hopefully not a high stress week this week with no quiz, but it is, psycholinguistics can be a bit of a heavy topic with a lot of different stuff coming at you. A little bit of a new way of looking at language compared to the previous modules we've done here. But anyway, that's it for this week's video. Definitely, of course, as usual, go through that chapter, learn the material, try out the practice quiz. Come along to Thursday's tutorial if you can, and as always, let me know if you have any questions in the tutorial by email on the discussion forum or elsewhere on eClass. You will be able to let me know over Reading Week if you have any questions. We do not have a tutorial next week, but I'm absolutely still busy getting material ready, responding to emails, all of that stuff. I'm completely available still. So get in touch if you want to talk over Reading Week about the course material or anything. That's all for this video.